The interpretation of narratives is to some extent subjective because everyone can experience art differently. At the same time, using literary analysis, we can still explain the most reasonable meanings that the artist meant to convey or that the audience is likely to understand. To understand themes of any work of art, however, spoilers are involved. Heavy spoilers. So consider this your spoiler warning. Endermagnolia, Bloom in the Mist is a dark fantasy Metroidvania that continues the narrative of the first game, Ender Lilies, taking place many decades later in a different nation with different protagonists, but a number of the same problems. The majority of the themes from the first game return, like purification, suffering, finality, and rest. And also, like the first game, Christian imagery and terminology continue to be used in Endermagnolia, such as Cain and Abel, the Holy Land, and the Empyrean. But is that just generic religious imagery and phraseology, or are there more specific biblical themes? In this video, we are going to explore these ideas and answer the question, how do Lilac and Magnolia bring salvation as enders and blooms in the mist? The first theme of Endermagnolia for today's video is that of salvation from madness to purpose. Just like in the first game, a major source of conflict in this world comes from the Blight, a magical disease fueled by hate in the heart and the physical manifestation of said blight, the Reign of Death. Even though these were resolved in Land's End, the Blight and the Reign of Death persist in the Land of Fumes, with an additional manifestation. In the Land of Fumes, there are, fumes. A deadly mist that carries the blight, driving the homunculi to madness, making them mutants. At the beginning of the game, the majority of the homunculi in the lower and central strata have already been overcome with this madness. Many of the homunculi were initially created with specific purposes. The motif of promises or duties is used to emphasize this concept of important responsibilities and purposes that are lost when a homunculus is driven mad by the fumes. For example, Joven made promises to Lilia to look after Levi and her sister, but he forgets this promise when driven to madness by the fumes. Our protagonist, Lilac, has a power similar to that of the ancient priestesses, the power to purify. This concept of purity is again symbolized by lilies and the character Lilia. In the Land of Fumes, however, this power has been modified. Instead of merely purifying, it's called tuning, a repurposing from homunculi. When Joven is tuned, he must find a new purpose, since Levi has already found a new partner, a different homunculus to look after her. Garm is another such homunculus, who was initially created to work in the lower stratum in the Magicite mines. When the fumes eventually drive him to madness, he forgets his kind heart and his purpose in helping humans. When Garm is tuned by Lilac, he no longer wishes to work for humans, but wants to protect his homunculi friends. Lars is another such homunculus, who had promised to protect and save Lilac, but actually attacks Lilac multiple times when affected by the fumes. Only when Lilac tunes Lars does he remember his promises and purpose of protecting and saving Lilac. As Lilac journeys through the Land of Fumes, he tunes many homunculi who have forgotten their duties or purposes when they were driven mad by the fumes. In the Bible, the book of Titus also talks about salvation in the context of being purified for good purposes. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in the present age, waiting for our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior Jesus Christ, who gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to purify for himself a people for his own possession, who are zealous for good works. Titus chapter 2 verses 11 to 14. Like how Jesus purifies Christians from their ungodliness to create a people belonging to him for good works, Lilac too tunes the homunculi from their mad and dangerous actions to good and noble purposes. But is Lilac only doing a spiritual purification, or is there more to it? This idea is connected to our second theme. The second theme of salvation in Endermagnolia I want to discuss is that of salvation from oppression to freedom. Throughout the game, Lilac is asked to liberate or free the homunculi. However, not only do the homunculi need to be freed from the effects of the blight, they also need to be freed from the oppression and cruelty of some of the humans, especially the Milius clan. The oppression of the homunculi happens in two main ways, the first of which is cruel experimentation. House Milius experiments on homunculi at the Biological Research Facility and the Subterranean Testing Site, using homunculi cruelly to better understand the effects of the fumes and methods of manipulating the blight that can be used to gain immortality. A multitude of homunculi are tested on. As mentioned earlier, Yolvin was experimented on and combined with beast genetics to create wings. Child test subject Leto was used as a test subject to determine how long homunculi can resist the effects of the fumes before going mad. Chief Attuner Jorn saves the shackled beast from the experiments of Milius as well. In addition to these inhumane experiments, many of the homunculi are oppressed for even less useful reasons. When Lilac ventures to Declan Milius's estate, he discovers many homunculi who are tortured and forced to fight for Declan's entertainment. In fact, there is an entire area dedicated to this senseless violence called the Arena Tower, with many homunculi created for the sole purpose of fighting each other in a gladiatorial lifestyle. Lilac ventures through, trying to free what homunculi he can from Declan's evil treatment. The Book of Exodus also discusses how God delivers from oppression. God spoke to Moses and said to him, "I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they lived as sojourners. Moreover, I have heard the groaning of the people of Israel whom the Egyptians hold as slaves, and I have remembered my covenant. Say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery to them. And I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great acts of judgment. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who has brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will bring you into the land that I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you for a possession. I am the Lord." Moses spoke thus to the people of Israel, but they did not listen to Moses because of their broken spirit and harsh slavery. Exodus chapter 6, verses 2 to 9. Like how the Lord frees the people of Israel from Egyptian slavery, Lilac frees many of the homunculi from experimentation and inhumane treatment. How this occurs, though, is actually quite convoluted, with a confusing set of loyalties and allegiances, which is related to our third theme. Our third theme about salvation in Endermagnolia is that of the role of betrayal in the big picture of salvation. Throughout the game, there are many betrayals that save another, either intentionally or indirectly. Declan Milius, Motley's uncle, betrays Clan Milius and Lord Motley by turning him into a homunculus and casting him into the lower stratum. While Declan intended evil for Motley and the Land of Fumes, Motley's web-like grappling hook and webbed barrier are integral to helping Lilac traverse the Land of Fumes. In other words, Motley being betrayed is an important part of saving the Land of Fumes. An even more obvious example of betrayal is that of Nola, who betrays House Frost by being a homunculus that is actually a Milius agent among the Frost. This betrayal is highlighted in Nola's murder of Lady Abelia, leader of House Frost. However, Nola's betrayal was actually because of Joran's betrayal of Abelia. Even though Joran was raised by Abelia, his desire to save Lilia from being used as Abelia's next body leads him to interfere with Nola's tuning. This interference causes Abelia to take Joran's body instead of Lilia's, who seems like she will eventually take control. Rather than let that happen, Joran asks his homunculus Raybolg to kill him in order to kill Abelia and to prevent her from transferring her soul to anyone else. In other words, Raybolg must betray Joran to save the Land of Fumes, although no one seems to know this but Joran, Raybolg, and Lilac. Nola herself doesn't seem to know that she betrayed House Frost, because she actually has a change of heart and betrays Milius by deciding not to continue to be Milius's agent. Instead, she sides with the Frosts, staying with Lilia to help raise Lilac as an attuner, betraying Milius to save Lilac. Finally, we see that Gilroy betrayed Nola. As Gilroy's sister, even though Nola was meant to be Gilroy's successor, Gilroy betrays her and seals her, impaling her and throwing her into the lower stratum. Gilroy says he actually does this in order to save Nola from the suffering of being the administrator of the Parasol. In the Bible, the Gospel too has a traitor in God's plan for salvation. When it was evening, he reclined at table with the 12. And as they were eating, he said, "Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me." And they were very sorrowful and began to say to him one after another, "Is it I, Lord?" He answered, "He who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born." Judas, who would betray him, answered, "Is it I, Rabbi?" He said to him, "You have said so." Matthew chapter 26, verses 20 to 25. The betrayal of Jesus is how he comes to be crucified and killed, which allows him to rise again to save the world. Similarly, Nola's betrayal is how she is able to gain Lilac and Lilia's help to destroy the Empyrean parasol to save the land of fumes, which is the climax of our final theme. Our last theme for Ender Magnolia Bloom in the Mist has to do with salvation from death to rebirth. This theme is even developed through the symbol of lilac himself, because lilacs are known as the Paschalia, the flower of Easter, associated with the resurrection of Jesus and with rebirth. This theme of death and rebirth is developed through many of the characters. Lady Abelia, leader of House Frost, is a body snatcher, someone who dies but then continues to live on by being reborn through transferring her soul to a new body. She had hoped to be reborn as Lilia, but this was stopped by Joran. Motley, Declan's nephew, also experienced a death and rebirth, dying as the Lord of Milius, but being reborn as the King of the Garbage Heap. Similarly, Declan Milius seeks immortality by dying as a human and being reborn as a homunculus. He was indeed able to be changed into a homunculus, but his longevity is cut short by Lilac and his homunculi when they free the homunculi of House Milius from Declan's oppression. Gilroy the Administrator is a biological replica of Cain Milius. In other words, when Cain died, figuratively he was still reborn as Gilroy, who he describes as his other self. This death and rebirth is even present within Gilroy himself, who has to constantly replace different parts of his body, constantly being reborn. Magnolia, or Nola, is the final rebirth of Cain and Gilroy as a sister, presumably also with Cain's DNA, so she can maintain or destroy the Empyrean parasol. This concept of death and rebirth is applied not only to the characters, but to entire systems and lands. The arena tower and Milius's oppression of the homunculi is described as an unending cycle of death and rebirth. In ending A, Magnolia kills Gilroy but takes his place in maintaining the Empyrean parasol. The death of Gilroy then causes the blighted parasol to be temporarily reborn without Gilroy's mutant administration affecting the homunculi. However, it is implied that this is only a temporary solution and that the blight will eventually corrupt Nola as well. In ending B, as the Ender, Magnolia destroys the Empyrean parasol completely, severing the connection between the land of fumes and the blighted land of origin, and ending the cycle of death and rebirth with one final rebirth of the land. In the Bible, the concept of a world being reborn is also described. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away." And he who was seated on the throne said, "Behold, I am making all things new." Also he said, "Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true." Revelation chapter 21, verses 1 to 5. Like how the Bible describes an eventual death of the first heaven and earth that gives way to a new heaven and earth, the destruction of the Empyrean parasol leads to the death of the system of suffering, and also to a rebirth, a new land of fumes reborn with a brighter future, represented by the destruction of the barrier between the land and the Empyrean, or heavens. Ender Magnolia Bloom in the Mist is a game with a powerful narrative, using Christian imagery, phrases, and symbols to convey its themes of purpose, freedom, betrayal, and rebirth. While I think it could have used some more work in terms of the pacing of the narrative and the tying up of loose ends, the themes of the game were definitely biblical and compelling, even if they were not executed as well as I would have liked. Despite this, I enjoyed my time with the game, and I hope there will be a third game with even better storytelling. That's all I have for you in this video. Bless you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If this video blessed you in some way, please consider watching some of my other videos, subscribing, or sharing with me some of your thoughts in the comments below.